Today we are going to uncover China's evil plan to control the world, and you won't believe how they're doing it. China's Belt and Road Initiative is one of the most ambitious projects ever taken on by any country, even more so than the US's Mars mission. China has made hundreds of billions of dollars worth of investments into this mega project. At first it was celebrated by many as the project of the century, but now, after 5 years, the truth of the matter is out. One by one, all the countries involved in China's Belt and Road Initiative are now realizing that it was actually just an evil plot for China to gain power over them. In return for massive loans, China would help build life-changing infrastructure projects like airports, motorways, and seaports. Sounds like a great deal, right? Well, turns out the deal was too good to be true. Instead, China has used the money to set up unfavorable conditions for these countries and get them into huge debts. The ports that were supposed to bring prosperity are instead filled with rusting cargo ships. We will take a look at these disasters one by one. But before that, let's start with the country that is the worst hit by this Chinese debt trap, Sri Lanka. Once upon a time, Sri Lanka was considered to be a paradise. It was known as the Pearl of the Indian Ocean. Its capital, Colombo, was called the Dubai of India. The people had high hopes when China proposed to invest billions of dollars to make Sri Lanka into a major shipping hub. The largest port in the country was the Hambantota port. In 2007, Sri Lanka took a loan of $1.12 billion from China to expand the port. China agreed to invest in building a modern deep-water port that could handle large container ships and become a major transit point for international trade. By expanding the port, Sri Lanka and China hoped to boost economic growth and create jobs for the local population. However, the project ended up being a complete failure and turned into a white elephant project. What went wrong? Well, the main reason is that Sri Lanka had no use for such a big port. The idea was that this new port would serve as a hub for international shipping companies. They would use the port to refuel and resupply, and this would create thousands of jobs for Sri Lankans. However, this never happened. After opening the port in 2011, it became clear that there was no need for such a big port. The port was way bigger than what Sri Lanka needed. Most of the time it remained empty or was only used for very few cargo ships. The port was losing millions of dollars every year, but Sri Lanka still had to pay back the loan to China, so the government decided to lease out the port to a Chinese company for 99 years. For 99 years, that means until the year 3018, Sri Lanka will not have control over their own port. But why did this happen? Why did such a big and expensive project fail? Well, there are a few reasons for that. First of all, the port was way too big for Sri Lanka. The country doesn't have enough ships or trade to fill up the port. Second, the port was built in a very remote location. This made it hard for ships to get there. And third, Sri Lanka didn't have enough money to pay back the loan, so they had to give up control of the port to China. The Hambantota port is one of many examples of how China has tricked poor countries to give away their valuable assets in return for loans. This is part of China's evil plan to control the world. They use loans to get countries into debt, and then they offer to forgive the debt if the country gives up something valuable. In the case of the Hambantota port, China offered to forgive Sri Lanka's debt. If they gave up control of the port, Sri Lanka agreed, and now China owns the port. How does this help China control the world? Well, the port is located in a strategic area. This gives China a military advantage. They can use the port to spy on other countries or even attack them. This is why the Hambantota port is a disaster for Sri Lanka and the region. It gives China too much power and control. When China came to Sri Lanka with the offer to invest in the country, the Sri Lankan government was very excited. They were desperate for money and China seemed like a good option. However, they didn't realize that they were signing away their future by taking on so much debt. Sri Lanka's economy is now in sharp decline and the country is struggling to pay back its debt. This has led to protests and chaos in the country. Sri Lankans are angry at their government for putting them in this position. They feel betrayed by China, who they thought was helping them, but was really just taking advantage of them. Sri Lanka's economy is important for the entire region. When Sri Lanka fails, it can cause problems for other countries. That's why it's important that Sri Lanka gets back on track and stops relying on China. Now let's take a look at another example. Laos. This country is landlocked between China, Thailand and Cambodia. It's one of the poorest countries in Asia, and most of its people live on less than $2 a day. Laos saw China's offer to build roads and railways as a chance to improve its economy and end its poverty. But now it's becoming more and more obvious that the Chinese project will not bring prosperity to Laos. Instead, It will turn the country into a Chinese colony. The biggest problem is that the projects are extremely expensive and Laos simply can't afford to pay for them. For example, the construction of the railway line from Kunming in China to Vientiane, the capital of Laos, cost about $6.2 billion. Laos doesn't have that kind of money, and it's already struggling with a lot of debt. To make matters worse, the railway line isn't even finished yet, and it's already losing money. According to official documents seen by the media, the company running the railway lost $48 million in its first year of operation. This is a big problem because it means that Laos is taking on more and more debt for a project that's not even making money. The railway line is supposed to help Laos become richer, but it's doing the opposite. It's making the country poorer. Another big problem is that the Chinese project is taking over important parts of Laos's economy. For example, China has already bought up 49% of the railway line, and it is possible that it will buy even more. This means that China will have a lot of control over Laos's economy. It can tell the country how to run its railway line, and it can even decide what prices to charge. This is a big problem because it means that Laos is losing its freedom to make decisions about its own economy. The country is becoming more and more dependent on China and less independent. Yet another problem is that the Chinese project is causing environmental damage in Laos. The construction of the railway line is destroying the environment and polluting the air and water. This is a big problem because Laos is already suffering from serious environmental problems. Deforestation, soil erosion, and climate change are all major issues in the country. The Chinese project is making these problems worse. Despite all these problems, Laos is still working with China to build more roads and railways. The country is planning to build a second railway line from the Chinese border to the Thai border. It's also planning to build more highways and bridges. Laos is also planning to give China even more control over its economy. For example, Laos is considering giving China a stake in its national airline. It's also considering allowing Chinese companies to build more factories and businesses in the country. Why is Laos doing all of this? Well, the answer is simple. Laos is desperate for money, and China is offering to give it some. The Chinese projects are not helping Laos. They are hurting the country and its people. But Laos is too poor to say no to China. Yet another example is Malaysia. In 2016, Malaysia agreed to work with China on the $24 billion project to build a new city called Forest City. The project was supposed to be a win-win situation. China would help Malaysia build a new city, and in return, China would get to buy a big piece of land from Malaysia. However, the project ended up being a disaster. First of all, Forest City is located in a very dangerous area. The city is close to a major earthquake zone, and it's also close to a typhoon belt. This makes it a very risky place to build a city. If an earthquake or a typhoon hits Forest City, it could be completely destroyed. Secondly, Forest City is built on a swampland. This means that the soil is very weak and unstable. If a big building is built on swampland, it can sink into the ground. This is exactly what happened to Forest City. The city started sinking into the ground, and this caused the whole project to collapse. Another problem with Forest City is that it was built in an area that is home to many endangered species. The construction of the city destroyed the habitat of these animals, and this caused many of them to die. Forest City was supposed to be a beautiful and modern city, but instead it turned into a disaster. The project was abandoned, and now it's just a ghost town. There are many other examples of China's evil plan to control the world through its Belt and Road Initiative. These projects may seem like a great idea, but they often turn into disasters. China takes advantage of poor countries and gets them into debt. The projects cause environmental damage, and they often fail. China's plan is working. The country is now controlling more and more countries around the world. The Belt and Road Initiative is just one part of this plan. China is also using other methods to control other countries. For example, China is investing billions of dollars in new military bases around the world. This gives China the ability to project power anywhere it wants. The country is also using its economic power to bully other countries. China is the biggest trading partner of many countries around the world. This gives China a lot of leverage over these countries. The country is also using its diplomatic power to control other countries. China is a member of the UN Security Council, and it often uses its veto power to block resolutions that it doesn't like. What can the world do to stop China's evil plan? There is no easy answer to this question. China is a powerful country, and it's not going to give up its power, is it? The best hope is that the other countries of the world can unite and stand up to China. The world needs to find a way to balance China's power and prevent the country from controlling everything. Otherwise, China's evil plan will continue to work and the country will continue to get more and more power. That's all for today. Thank you guys for watching the video, and please don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support motivates us to create more quality content.